As I understand it, 3 carriages have been overturned. We don't know the reason for that yet. The suggestion might be partly the landslip. Obviously, another possible explanation is that it was due to rails buckling in the heat. No doubt the Rail Accident Investigation Board will determine the cause of the accident and take any necessary steps.
Now, before we get into Payne and Friends this evening, we're going to get more on that passenger derailment in Lewes in East Sussex. Joining me now is Norman Baker, the former Lib Dem MP for Lewes and ex-Transport Minister. Norman, thanks for joining us on Times Radio. Have you been aware of anything like this before in that area, which is a very busy one?
No, I haven't been. There was a very, very small minor derailment at about 5 miles per hour about 20 years ago with nobody injured at all on that occasion. And I have to say that rail accidents in this country are mercifully very rare, which is why they make the news, because they don't happen every day. I mean, car accidents happen every day, but rail accidents don't. As I understand it, 3 carriages have been overturned. We don't know the reason for that yet. The suggestion might be partly the landslip. Obviously, another possible explanation is that it was due to rails buckling in the heat. No doubt the Rail Accident Investigation Board will determine the cause of the accident and take any necessary steps subsequently. It appears, so far as we know, and I'm not privy to any special information, but it seems to be the case that nobody has lost their lives, fortunately, and people are getting out of the train themselves or being helped out by the emergency services.
And from your experience as the MP for the area, Norman, how will Southern Rail cope with this? Will they have the facilities and the abilities to be able to deal with an incident of this scale?
Well, it's a Network Rail issue, particularly in terms of the infrastructure. I understand Southern have suspended all services through Lewes, although they needn't have done so in some ways because the line, for example, from Brighton to Eastbourne doesn't go anywhere near where the accident occurred, which is north of Lewes on the London line. So no doubt there will be no services until at least 10 o'clock tonight, probably later than that. They'll want to make sure that the railways are completely safe before any trains are allowed back on them. And if it has been the case that the rails have buckled, we don't know that, but if they have buckled, that will take considerably longer to repair.
And lastly, Norman, you mentioned this point about the heat, and I guess there's a wider question about our infrastructure generally, that today, has been an incredibly hot day, making this summer, again, a very, very hot one, probably the hottest on record, I think. It feels as if that there's going to be rising questions about the UK's infrastructure, be it railways, be it reservoirs, dealing with this. What sort of things do you think need to happen to make sure that we are better prepared if hotter summers like this are the norm?
Well, they are going to be the norm, I think, and we are woefully behind as a country looking at adaptation to climate change. Whether it was the landslip today or whether it was buckled rails, both of those relate to the weather at the moment. And we've seen other instances. For example, we had in Stonehaven instance on the railways a couple of years ago, which was a landslip. We were now anticipating events occurring in the infrastructure which wouldn't have occurred, say, 10 years ago. So we urgently need a plan for the government to look at all infrastructure to make sure it is now able to be adapted to the new weather we're in.
Well, thank you very much. That was Norman Baker, who's the former Lib Dem MP for Lewes and former Transport Minister. We'll bring you more throughout the next hour as and when that story develops. A passenger train has derailed in East Sussex that we're seeing emergency services are at the scene near Lewes railway station. It happened just before 4 p.m. There's lots of images online showing 2 carriages lying on their side, but it's not yet known if there are any casualties. Joining me now is James MacCleary, who's the Lib Dem MP for Lewes. James, thank you for joining us. What's your reaction to this news?
Good evening to you. Shock, I think, as with many other local residents. We have a fantastic safety record, if not necessarily punctuality record, with Southern Rail down our way. Lewes Station's a very busy one. Lots of commuters going up and down to London. I think this was one of the London trains coming into Lewes by the look of it. I use that line all the time. So a huge shock and a lot of gratitude, I think, to the emergency services and everyone who's helped out with the response.
And James, what information have you received so far about what's happened?
Not a lot more than's in the public domain. It sounds mercifully like The injuries are relatively light, which is incredible when you see the scenes, which look really quite shocking. But I suspect the train was going pretty slowly at that point coming into Lewes, so that may well have helped avoid more serious injuries. But the emergency services are still on site, but we know that there are no fatalities and that the injuries are being treated where they've happened in local hospitals. But as I say, emergency services are still there, so we'll have to wait to hear if there's anything else to report.
And there's been reports of safety checks on that particular line in the area this week. To what extent, as the local MP, have you been aware of any concerns?
I had a meeting literally last week with GTR, who are the parent company of Southern Rail, and we did discuss the track and the fact that it has been a bit bumpier in recent months, which is possibly a result of the incredibly hot weather we've had recently. But I mean, I can't speculate at all on the cause of the accident. Of course, there'll be a full investigation, and we'll have to wait to see what that says. But we do know that the rail companies have been reporting that the extreme dry conditions have been affecting embankments and track conditions. We've had a lot of speed restrictions in the area recently, which is directly related to the heat. So, as I say, we'll have to see what the investigation crops up. But there have been concerns about the condition of the tracks recently, definitely.
And finally, James, what would you urge your constituents to do in terms of the heat? That your patch is somewhere that's been struggling a lot with the heat wave and the drought at the moment. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's a lot of advice out there, but obviously people need to be so careful. We're a seaside area. We've got some wonderful beaches locally, and of course the South Downs, but they're very exposed areas, and so we've got to be careful about overexposure to the heat, making sure we stay hydrated and look after each other. And that's been the most incredible thing about this incident. Lewes is a great community, and they've really rallied round, and I've had so many reports of people offering help and sticking together with this really shocking incident. And I think that applies to the extreme weather we're seeing too, that we need to stick together and look after each other. Well, thank you very much. That's James MacCleary, who's the Lib Dem MP for Lewes. That was about the breaking news about a passenger train being derailed in East Sussex, and we'll bring you more news as that story continues to develop.
Times reporter Emma Yeomans is at the scene and has this report.
I'm just leaving the cordon outside Lewes, where the train crash has taken place. It's taken place on the outskirts of the town. Tracks go over a little embankment by the river, and it appears that 3 or 4 carriages have tumbled down that embankment towards the river, but luckily landed in the field. There are a huge number of emergency service vehicles on scene. We've counted upwards of 14 ambulances, multiple fire and rescue trucks, including technical support and technical services vehicles, as well as Network Rail and other services, and of course police. We've also seen 4 air ambulances depart the scene, but we do understand now that all 40 passengers who at one point were feared to be trapped in a carriage have been safely extracted, and everyone is off the train. The initial response now seems to be winding down a little, but victims and survivors are being taken to either hospital or to a relief centre in town. The area where this happened is a very popular dog walking area and would have been quite busy potentially during the summer holidays. It's normally a very peaceful set of meadows by the river, but of course today that peace has been absolutely shattered.